Loud. Okay, so welcome everyone. Everyone who's joining us today, those who are over 50 and everyone else who is interested to know more about the Wize generation. This special online conversation is hosted by the Wize Move Society, the online community for everyone who is over 50 and all those who would love to join us. So during our last summit, Boomer or Bloomer, What's Next in April, we experienced again that this generation is growing by the day. We're living longer, are longer healthy and active, and are better educated than ever. This generation is not on the way out. We are definitely part of the future. So it was again a huge wake-up call that this generation will impact in many ways our society, our economy, our workplace, the healthcare system, and so much more in the years to come. And with these Tuesday live conversations, we aim to give you a glimpse of what is happening online on the Wize Move Society, to share a bit about both the challenges and the opportunities that the over 50 are facing, as well as how the members of the Wize Move community work together to create the solutions and play an active role in society and in the economy. So for those who join us on Zoom, welcome. We love you to contribute to the conversation. And if you've joined us on Facebook, please share your feedback and questions in the comments. So my name is Ingun. I'm the founder of Move into the Future and the creator of the Wize Move Society. I'm here today with my co-host, Dr. Tatiana Rowson, and our guest, Kerry Hannon, career and retirement strategist, speaker, and best-selling author. And together we will talk about her new book, In Control at 50 Plus, how to succeed in a new world of work. Well, it's very interesting. So before we do that, I would like to give my co-host Tatiana the floor so she can share a bit more about her background, and she will pass on the stage to Kerry, who will give a first short intro about herself and her big why. Why is she doing what she is doing? So, Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ingun. So hello, everyone that's joining us now. I'm Tatiana Rowson. I'm an academic, a social psychologist, and I'm pretty much interested in these transitions at midlife, so the 50s and what happens then. And my research look into how these transitions impact the quality of life in later life, and how can we learn from what's going on now so we can plan better futures as we move forward. So I'm very, very intrigued, Kerry, to hear from you. It's really exciting to talk about careers, one of my favorite topics, as well as aging and as well as managing this world of work out there. So I will just sit back and welcome you into the room, into the conversation, and yes, and ask us to tell us all about In Control at 50 Plus. Welcome, Kerry.
Well, thank you so much. It is so great to be here with you all. And the invitation, I truly appreciate. This is obviously an area that I'm incredibly passionate about. When you say, you know, Kerry, and I'm just going to start with the very simplest thing, is you said, why do you do this? Why are you doing it? I mean, I've written 14 books, and a lot of them have been about work. And in personal finance, I write a lot about women and money. And what matters to me, my why, is if everything I do, the decision I make about whether I take on a project or not is, can I impact someone's life in a positive way? And can I add to their future financial security? And those are things that really matter to me. And given the environment that we live in, which you alluded to this at the beginning, is longevity. I mean, it is just, we are living longer lives, presumably healthier. This generation, never before have we been at this place in time before. As I think you had one of my friends and colleagues, Bradley Sherman, on, and he talked about, you know, the whole idea that it's a super age, more people over 65 than under 5. So this is not just for our generation, but it's for the people coming behind us to understand how to navigate these longer periods, which you need to work. I mean, the simple idea that you can be, quote, retired for 3 decades. Are you kidding me? Like, who absolutely has focused on how much money they actually need to have saved in order to do that? I mean, it is daunting on so many levels. But to step back a little bit and talk about how I got started doing this. I mean, I for many years have worked in the area of money and personal finance and writing about careers. And my very first book was the 10-Minute Guide to Retirement for Women. But what I did was I left a job when I was writing for the paper here in the US, USA Today, which I guess it goes around the world as well. And I had a nice column writing about taxes and retirement, but I was miserable. And I took on a book project with a friend of mine who's a fabulous photographer. And she was going out to the Navajo reservation in the US, which is at the four corners where, Colorado and Arizona, New Mexico and Arizona all come together, the big Navajo reservation, and doing a coffee table book about weavers, the older weavers no longer being able to pass their tools down to the younger ones because there weren't so many younger ones staying on the reservation. So I profiled these weavers. But there was one in particular, Mary, who was in her 80s. And Mary lived in a Hogan about 45 minutes down a dirt road from a paved road. And it's a very small living space with no electricity and no running water. And Mary wove monumental rugs. And I'm not joking, these were spectacular. And she was in her 80s. I had a translator because she only spoke Navajo. But when I looked at Mary's work, it was just magic. And when I interviewed her, she says, you ask questions no one thinks about. And Mary was pure joy, the pride in her work and what she did. And I had all my sensibilities like, wow, this is America and no running water. Mary wasn't looking at that. Mary loved what she did. And when I stepped outside of where she worked and I looked around my environment, it was spectacularly beautiful. That trip fundamentally changed the way I look at work. I realized that it's not all these things that everyone layers on about how much money you make and all of these things, but it's really that inner joy that you get from what you do. And what really matters is that loving what you do. So when I started off writing various other books, I did What's Next, people who made a dramatic job switch after 20 or 30 years doing one thing, leaping off and doing something completely different. And I spent about 3.5 years traveling around the US, meeting these second actors and just blown away by their inspiration. I not necessarily could do what they do. One was a Navy pilot and became a circus manager. I mean, they're crazy jumps, but they did all kinds of cool things. But to fast forward to this book, In Control at 50 Plus, I realized, and all of you on this call, and you my two hosts know this deeply, is that coming out of the pandemic, the workplace was fundamentally changed. And it is something that, as we recognize that workers over 50 need to stay on the job longer because of this longevity, and ageism is still a huge factor, a huge stumbling block. And so I wanted to say, okay, let's take a look at this. A lot of people in our age cohort did get laid off or took early retirements during this time. And in fact, at least here in the US, many of the retirees are now back on the job again. And it can have do with inflation. It's some to do with a crazy stock market. Lots of other economic issues have sort of got, yeah, I want to. But what the pandemic did is allowed all of us to step back and figure out what our priorities are. Like, what do we really want from our work right now? I mean, yeah, maybe there are more yesterdays and tomorrows, but you still have plenty of runway. There's plenty of things ahead that you need to dream for and think for and reach for and take control of. So I kind of looked at, and I'll stop in a second, that 5 major trends, and I'll explore each of these if you want me to, coming out of the pandemic and how it impacts this cohort of workers over 50. And in fact, I honestly think anyone of any age will recognize these important trends. But the first is remote work is here to stay. The second is contract work has exploded. The third is entrepreneurship is really lit up, and we love that for older entrepreneurs. Career transition is no longer an outlier thing. It's no longer, oh, you're such a risk taker. No. It's really become, of all ages, career transition coming out of the pandemic, as we say, I can redeploy. I don't have to reinvent myself. I can redeploy these skills over here into a new field that really gets me excited about making a difference again. And the final thing is education. I mean, lifelong education is non-negotiable now. And we realize that coming out of the pandemic, the number of virtual learning opportunities exploded. So you don't need to go back and get a master's degree and all these other, like go to a particular place to get a certificate or whatever. It is available online, these wonderful virtual, and it's affordable. And to stay in the workplace in this age, as we move forward, you have absolutely got to stay relevant and stay up to speed on your industry, on your skills. And if you're shifting industries, on that industry, but you have to be nimble. And learning just is the most amazing thing for everything in our personal well-being, because your whole mind shifts. No matter what you're learning, you're a beginner again, then you learn. It's this rhythm of life. And I just love it.
Thank you. I love your enthusiasm, Kerry. And, also your storytelling, the stories about these people that you have talked to. It means that what you're doing is not just, looking at from a distance. You're really talking about people that, this is happening to them. And they are also the ones who can take that next step. So thank you for that. Before I continue, of course, welcome to Eugene and Mary Jane as well. Please dive into the conversation when you're ready. Yes, Kerry, there is so much going on. It is about that workplace that needs to be different. There is this change, all these transitions into new markets, into new jobs. There's so much going on. But what I constantly worry, for instance, here in the Netherlands, we have more jobs than we have people. There's a huge shortage of professionals, but still there are so many people 50 plus unemployed, so many. And, and I think it's not specifically in one industry. It's not only healthcare, it's not only education, it's not only, but it's everywhere. So what do you see happening?
Well, I think that there's still this innate bias in the hiring process for sure. But I often think, and I honestly believe that a lot of workers, especially if they've stepped out of the workforce during the pandemic or were laid off for some reason, maybe they were caregiving and they had to it was too much for for me, I had my 91-year-old mom with me with dementia, and I was hanging by a thread. And luckily I was running my own business, so I was able to work hours, but I don't know how people with full-time jobs were able to do that during that time, that kind of thing. But what I think is people get stuck in a moment and they often try to replicate their old job. And they haven't done that hard work to really look and say, what skills do I need? It's not, you cannot count on your previous experience to land you a new job. You absolutely have to have those skills they're looking for. Secondly, your network is more important than ever. And I always like to say networking is one letter away from not working. And it's just simply not that it's networking. Networking isn't a chore. This is simply lifting up other people. So by going on something like LinkedIn or any of your social media platforms, you find a way to raise other people up, to share ideas. So you're not really looking for a job particularly with them in mind, but it's building the people who do you know. And the only way to get hired with the way the artificial intelligence, all the screenings, they're all going to employers hire people the way they always have. They hire people they know, and people who they know, right? So that connection is more critical than ever today. So you have to reach out to tell everyone far and wide that you're looking, but you also have to look at those companies. First, be selective. Don't just send resumes to dozens of companies. Pick 5 or 6 or 7 that you want to work for. Take control. Say, this company appeals to me. I like their mission. I like what they're doing. I think I would be a good fit for them. Narrow it down, really dig down. Who do you know there? And start that way, because it is the only way. Yes, you can find out what jobs are available. You can find out what skills you need by looking at the jobs posting. But frankly, if you don't know somebody there, you're going to have a tough slog of it. I will say, though, anecdotally, and I do not have hard numbers on this, a lot of workers over 60 have landed jobs in the last 6 months because, and I mean over 55, over 60, by employers who get it and who realize, you know what, they need workers. They need, but they don't want to take the time to train somebody to ramp them up. They don't want to, they're happy to bring on an experienced worker who can just start the job. I mean, honestly, I mean, I frankly, in my own case, I took on a full-time position in January with Yahoo Finance, right? And I adore it. This is like such a blast, but the recruiter found me on LinkedIn. I had run my own business for 20 years. I was like, what? I'm not. But the fact is, I think, and I haven't really talked to them that deeply, but I think they hired me because they needed someone who they could count on, who could step in and do the job they needed. And I didn't need any training. I could just do the job. And I work for an editor who's decades younger than me. And all the things that I used to tell older workers about, you know, you've got to do this. I had to practice this myself the last few months, and it's been fantastic because, you know, I think older workers often applying, they put up all these concerns and screens and they kind of take themselves out of the game. They're not curious enough to figure out that curiosity. First, the word curiosity is the word you have got to use in any interview because it shows that you're eager to try new ways of doing things. And I've had to learn new technology. I've had to learn new ways of communicating. And I am so impressed by this energizing environment for me to work with people who are younger than me, who respect me, and I respect their intelligence as well. And it's been a blast. And so I want everyone to, you know, be open-minded about what comes their way and say, you know, that's not really in my lane, but say, you know what, maybe it is in my lane. Let me give it a try. Because to be honest with you, at this stage in our careers, you're not going to ruin your career. You can, you know, it's like it's like a big quilt. You can do something for a little while and switch if you want to. I'm not saying, you know, you just have to, there are no set rules anymore.
No, and it's so much fun. And there are so many opportunities, you know, as long as you dare to see them. And yes, it is about curiosity, adventure, exploration, things like that, that make it a lot more fun than looking for the same thing that you've already done for many, many years.
And can I tell you just a quick networking story? Because everyone hears that word and they glaze over. So I talk about this in my book, In Control, but I interviewed this gentleman who was in his 50s, and he was laid off slightly pre-pandemic from a sales job, right? And he kept trying to get another sales job. And he finally realized, you know what? I think that they really want young salespeople, right? So, I mean, the ageism was pretty clear to him, although nobody was saying that. But he was a fabulous sailor. So he went down here in the US to Florida and got a job teaching at a sailing school for the winter. And while he was out teaching sailing to someone, this guy who he was teaching said, you know, I run this company in New Jersey, and, you know, we've been having trouble hiring a project manager. And he's like, hey, you should apply for it. And the guy who I interviewed, the sailor's like, why would I interview for a job as a project manager? I'm a salesperson. I've never, ever been a project manager. I have no certifications. And he said, you know what? You are. You know how to get from A to B. You know when things come up on the water, how to shift direction, how to quickly make decisions to get to the destination. So in fact, this guy did go up, interviewed for this job. Yes, he knew the CEO. He had been sailing with him, but he did get the job. And he has now been promoted. He absolutely loves it. He said, I never would have applied for a job as a project manager, but what it was he did this. There were skills that he had that he didn't recognize from a hobby that in fact applied to the job market. So I would encourage workers to, again, when we say open up about getting out of your lane a little bit, not replicating your old job, but also really, what are your skills? Do you actually know what you're good at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a discussion we have here as well. You know, also put your hobbies, but also all your volunteer things that you've been doing. That is important to also reflect on during a, you know, a conversation about a job. So yeah. Mary Jane, I'm coming back to you. Let's first give Tatiana the opportunity to react.
Thank you. It's interesting, Kerry, what you're saying, and thank you for pointing those things out, because sometimes we forget that it takes a little bit of open-mindedness and effort to actually find new ways and new opportunities. And one of the things that strikes me about what the stories you're telling us is when I work with fresh graduates, they're not very different. They still think there are only 3 jobs in the world: engineer, doctors, and lawyers. And we have to tell them that actually it's not about just those labels, it's about the skills you bring. And as they are very young, those are from their personal life, from playing a team sport, from being the middle child in their families, or I don't know, there are other experiences. And they having to learn that. But I find that probably because they're young, they accept it. And as someone getting to midlife, becomes harder to see that actually it's okay to build on that. Do you see that with the people you met and you interviewed?
Without question, there's this fear, right? There's this fear of rejection, this fear of failure. This has always worked for me in the past. I'm just going to stay in my own lane. And these are for people who have actually not seeking jobs right now, but are actually still employed, but they're afraid to raise their hand and ask for new duties, or to push to be asked to be part of a workforce development program, because they kind of want to just stay in the, what if they, it really is great because it ramps up your adrenaline. It gets you eager about your work, enthusiastic and engaged, which is really what your manager wants or your employer wants. But you're afraid that, if I ask to do that, I might not succeed at it. And so you kind of keep doing what you've always done. And that hurts you in the workplace, as well as those that seeking to get in. So I think you need to always think, I like to tell people, always think like an entrepreneur, right? Me Inc. So even if you are employed right now, or you're looking to work for a company and not start your own business, they are just your first client. You have lots of clients. You're in charge here. So you can decide how you want to frame it up in your mind. But when you think of yourself as the owner of your own business, man, does that engage you in a way that's different, that gives you power. And I think that's super important. But I do see there's this fear of failure. And so it's important to push beyond that and to be willing to try new things. And it's that learner mentality, which I got to go back to just saying why learning new things, whether you're learning something that has nothing to do with your work, it gives you that resilience, right? Of you're a beginner and then you learn something new. And this is something that you can build that muscle of being willing to take chances, to start over again, to be a greenhorn, a beginner. And a lot of folks, when we get to this age, we don't want to take that chance. And that's, in today's job market, everything is moving so quickly. The technology is changing, the jobs that are out there are changing, that if you don't jump on that, then you're going to be left behind. And some people don't recognize the speed at which things are moving.
No, it's true. It's true. It's interesting you touch on learning. It's so that all the research out there shows that learning and the skills are one of the key factors that holds people back on moving on at this stage. And I'm in education, so I'm suspicious to comment on that. But for me, learning is leaving. And if we stop learning, then it's hardly any point. So I'm going to make a leap and a hook, and I'm going to invite Mary Jane. You had your hand up. So I know learning is your thing. So I'm going to just pass the ball.
Well, I think for both Eugene and myself, it's something that makes our heart sing. But what is coming to my mind as you're talking, Kerry, and some of the things from Ingun and yourself, Tatiana, it's about investing in yourself. And it's not just the curiosity investment that you make, but also I think coaching, really important. So things that, we talked, you guys mentioned skill sets, know your skill sets. Most of us are on a treadmill and we're doing the same thing over and over again, and we're getting the same results. And I think by stepping out of that comfort zone, and even just a little bit to get to know yourself. So again, coming back, I think, to one of the premier things is self-awareness, but it's skill sets. It's what are my values? What's important to me in life? Because that may lead me to a path that I would never have ever considered. What are my strengths, qualities that I have that are really prevalent for myself? And so I think that this is all that it takes. And again, it's also taking some of the responsibility, if you're in the workplace and concerned about what your future looks like, about asking your employer, yes, it may rock the boat somehow, but in all likelihood, I can't see it having a negative effect to say, I really want to explore. Will you help me find a way to explore what my skill sets are, what my strengths are, etc. And so that is really what I'm picking up from what you're sharing, Kerry, in all of this.
I love that you said that, because I think it's so true that we don't recognize often what's some of our best skills, because we take them for granted.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, and what else? So what you mentioned right at the top about coaching, and I'm a huge fan of career coaching. If it doesn't have to be a huge like age, session after session after session, but people who have lost jobs particularly, or stepped out of the workplace and trying to get back in, they kind of lose their mojo, right? They and it can be the rejection from not hearing back, the sort of the ghosting, the employers, you never hear anything when you apply, or whatever, can be really discouraging. And if you can have somebody who's not in your family or your close friend or a colleague really look at you, look at who you are, what you've done, your experience, what you love, just like you said, what you value, what your value is, and outside, like an unbiased look, it really is an amazing thing, helping people land work that they love, and that's critical. And I think there are several studies I've seen too that show that element of career coaching really is a powerful ingredient in landing a job, because it just shifts the dynamic for people.
Yeah, and one last thing that I think of as well is that this lifelong learning, but continue to learn and grow, become resilient. It's about building that self-efficacy muscle that many of us miss. The belief in no matter, I don't know yet how to do that, but I can learn it. And I think that the learning is a critical factor. Stretch yourself a little bit and see just what you can reach with that. And then you'll be able to take the next step and the next step. So yeah, thank you, Kerry.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's funny, when I was telling you all about, starting this position with Yahoo Finance. So my editor said to me, well, we work in Google Docs. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't, I've always worked in Word, and that's how I always do it. She goes, well, no, we work in Google Docs. So I was like, okay. So I quickly remembered a friend of mine who works for Reuters. He told me he had switched to Google Docs about 2 years ago, and he loves it. So I'm like, I emailed him. I'm like, Mark, I have to learn this really quickly. So he goes, quick, screen share. So he gave me a tutorial on how to use Google Docs. I never said another word to my editor or manager. I learned the technology very quickly, and I was empowered, but I just reached out behind the scenes. I'm like, okay, I got this. I know I can learn. I know this, but it's a shift in technology. I had to learn something new, and but it was fun. And that's what we have to be creative about. Okay, I know I have to learn this. So how do I do this without it being complicated, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it sounds like small steps, but it's, if you've been doing that for such a long time, it is a relatively big step. Yeah, thank you for that. Eugene, how about you?
Kerry, yes, fascinating just listening to you, and I just want to hone in on this one aspect that you raised in terms of how people get stuck in the moment. And the reality is that as we age, we become more and more set in terms of certain ways that perpetuate and drive how we show up in the future. And unless we develop that curiosity and that novelty, that seeking novelty that you speak of, and the desire and the exploration of new ideas and new learning, will remain stuck in that trap. And I know Mary Jane is very close to this conversation as well, where we have this notion of habits that define how we actually show up. And if we keep on bumping our head against the same brick wall without getting a different result, It's when we need to step back and start saying, what will I do differently? How will I re-educate myself? How will I re-energize myself? And people at our age group have got such a vast amount of experience and knowledge, and see things that that other generations don't necessarily see yet when we step into environments and into businesses. But it's not necessarily what the businesses want us to do. So we've got to temper our skill set in such a way that we become valuable again. And the only way we do that is by embracing the new technologies and the new knowledge, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's just fascinating listening to you. And this example that you use of having to move into Google Docs at a very rapid pace, for me, is exactly what we need to do, because it doesn't help if you get stuck in that space of saying, well, I know what I know and I'm really good at it, when that's not the skill set that somebody wants anymore. So thanks for bringing that. And perhaps if you want to just expand on that a bit more, I'd appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. There was one other thing that came to mind when you said that too, is like the importance of when you're in the workplace or whatever, is being able to just say, you know, we are used to doing things a certain way, and communication is one of the biggest things that we're, you know, for all of us on this panel, this discussion, is that we know how we like to communicate. How is that? And again, I'm going to go back to this new example of my working for someone much younger than me. I finally realized that she wasn't returning my emails or my phone calls, and even texts. So I was like, oh, jeepers, you know, what in the heck is going on here? And I finally realized that the way she liked to communicate was on Slack. Now, I had never had Slack, but that's how they communicate. So I had that conversation. I said, oh, so this is the way. She's like, yeah. So I'm like, oh, so I wish I'd had that conversation maybe a few days earlier, and I wouldn't have been sort of anxious about it all. But I think I encourage older workers too, that whenever you're in a work situation, the channels of communication is, we are great communicators. I mean, we're probably better than maybe the younger generations coming behind, because we have honed this skill over written and oral communications. But we need to know, how's this next generation doing it, and how can we seamlessly continue that? And that's just a little piece of what you were saying, but I think it's really true.
Right, thank you.
Okay. I was thinking of it, and I think Mary Jane, we had this conversation last week, that you had been talking to someone that at a, you know, later in a career, especially people who start their own business, men decide to become consultants, interim managers, you know, actually doing the same thing that they have been doing for many, many years, but then independently. Oh, I'm sorry. Women are more creative and want to have an impact. So they are looking for really different ways of building that future. Can you respond to that?
Is that
Do you
for
want, yeah, is
Mary
that
Jean
for
or for me?
Kerry? Mhm.
Ingrid, is that for Mary Jean? Or for me?
I think, Mary Jane, we had that discussion, wasn't
We
it?
did.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
But Kerry, is that something that you recognize? I think that this was shared
Yeah.
with me over
No,
this past weekend. And when she retired, you know, and all of her colleagues have retired, she has focused on she's on many boards of advisories. She's volunteering her time in many ways. She's got a great pension. And she said, but my male colleagues that retired around the same time or after me, they're all settling into, you know, more consulting, interim management, et cetera. And so I don't know whether to say that women are more creative, but I mean, just the choices that we're making seem to be different than maybe what our male counterparts can be making or are making. And I wonder if you have any thoughts or comments on
thanks.
that.
I think that's a really interesting observation. And I have a whole chapter in this book, In Control, just about women. And I think that women entrepreneurs over 50 in particular are so interesting, because frankly, our businesses tend to be more successful over time in many ways. And one thing I attribute it to is women are fabulous investors too, right? Because, and if you compare over time, that women outperform their investments, outperform men's in many of the studies I've looked at. And why that is because women go slow. We do our homework. We're patient. We're willing to, we're not going for that home run. We're not necessarily taking that easy path. And so we're very patient. And women like to start businesses that, yes, have impact, that have meaning to them, but they're willing to start as micro businesses. They're willing to start on the side and letting them grow organically in a way that allows them to gain traction, where men tend to want to go someplace that's going to be safe, it's going to be secure, and they know they can move forward with it and do something they already know. Women tend to be more collaborative, and I know I'm overstating this to a certain degree, but tend to be more collaborative. And so whereas a man might want to set off on a single venture, like I'm a consultant, great. They only have to rely on themselves. But women like this inner working with other women or others in general. And what's been so beautiful about coming out of the pandemic, one of the trends, obviously, with this virtual workforce, remote working, we have this amazing workforce that sprung up, and contract workers, obviously, which is another trend, that you can hire somebody to helicopter in and be your bookkeeper once a month, or help you with your social media marketing and all that stuff. So it's not as expensive as it once was to start a business if you don't have to have bricks and mortar. And women are much more collaborative in the sense saying, you know what, I'm not really that great at sales, but I can bring somebody in and work with them. And they don't feel like they're giving it away by sharing the duties with someone. So I think there's some intrinsic things about the way women approach work that is different, and that we kind of like having that organic feel of having something we can sink into, but we're willing to take our time to make that happen, so again, we're not talking about starting the next massive company, the next Tesla or something. We're talking micro businesses and something that really tends to have impact on community. Or I think I see a lot of women starting businesses that are intergenerational, like a mother and a daughter, or an aunt and a niece, or whatever it is you see these, or a nephew. I mean, there are a lot of these intergenerational pairings to start businesses. I think it's the magic of the next onslaught of entrepreneurship, is building with the two generations, creating companies that have the sort of wingspan to last more than just a few years.
So of course I want to involve the only man today in this conversation. Do you recognize this? I know you really did a sidestep. You really did new things.
Yes, thanks, Ingun. I certainly have done a lot of new things, but I still felt a little bit like Kerry was speaking about me there, and had some personal insight into my life. I mean, the reality is that I spent a lot of time exploring how to break free from the obstacles that held me in the past. And it was a deliberate thinking exploration process that brought me to a space of saying, well, I'm going to do something completely different that I haven't done before, and I'm going to educate myself around it. So it was that curiosity and desire to learn that brought me to a completely new space. But at the end of the day, I've still gone from corporate into consulting, and the consulting work sometimes becomes intra-management work. So I do feel that, I'm kind of caught in that trap to an extent, albeit that I've broken away from my core skill set, which I built over many, many years in corporate life. And I don't really operate too much in that space anymore, but in a different sort of space. So yeah, just a couple of tender nerves there that you hit as you were speaking. Thanks for that.
But Eugene, I also think that you are making an impact, because the kind of consulting work that you're doing is changing lives.
Yes.
And changing a corporate culture.
Yes.
So there's a difference with somebody, stepping into, I think, from my understanding, stepping back into a role that they had for 20 years, but now do it as a consultant, and really looking at maybe just profits as being the only, and not, the people, the planet, and the other social obligations. And again, we're talking here in general, I mean, this is not black and white, and it's definitely not all men and all women. We've got to be really careful about stereotyping ourselves in this regard. So, yeah.
Well, Mary Jane, it's quite interesting in the sense that even if I do get to do consulting work, which is similar to my corporate experience, even that work is now very strongly grounded and has a very strong underlying principle of understanding neuroscience in the brain. And most of the work that I would do is I would actually do an educational process. So I wouldn't simply do the consulting work for a client, but also educate them in terms of what are the things that's happening in the background that's actually preventing the organization from moving forward. So for me, that is the step and the passion that I found in neuroscience is just that newness and freshness of looking at the same things that I'd been looking at over the last 30, 40 years, now with fresh eyes and different eyes, actually changes the way in which one approaches it. So for me, that's part of the step change that I've done.
I think that's a great example. Exactly. I mean, I love that, because that's a reframing of the mindset, but it really recharges your mission, and that's fantastic. One thing I wanted to mention when we talked at the beginning of the conversation about this idea of all these people who are looking for work, and employers say they have jobs, but no one's getting. I think one thing that the trend coming out of the pandemic is this the world of this huge surge in contract positions and consulting positions, that kind of thing. I think people often, if they think, oh, I'm just looking for a full-time job, they forget the importance of being able to be a consultant, or to be able to go in on a project basis into a company where you are hired for your expertise, and they get to know you, you get to know them. Because you might, take control. You might not even want to work for that company full time anyway, but it's a way to get around ageism and that sort of, because you're in the door already, and it could grow. It could turn out to be a full-time position if that's what the individual is looking for, or like you have it, there are consulting positions that you feed off and continually energize you. But for the individual that really wants that full-time job, they have to really pay attention that it's okay to keep your resume alive, keep your skills sharp by taking those positions, being aware that, depending on where you are at your age, 50 to 60 is a different, what kind of benefits you might want that would come from a full-time job, versus if you're over 60, maybe you don't need the same kind of benefits, and it works differently, obviously, in different countries. But I think that people forget to embrace the idea of contract work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the reality is that if you're at this stage of your life, permanent employment isn't necessarily the best option for you in any event. Having the freedom and the ability to work as and when you want to, and also the ability to spend a bit more personal time is part of that valued experience that I have, in the sense of I can afford to go and play golf, for instance, on a Friday afternoon or whatever, and it's not a stressful situation where I've got to look a boss in the eyes saying, "Ooh, I'm not going to be in the office this afternoon." So it gives you that sort of freedom and capability to still be productively engaged, but also to be able to spend a bit more quality time on yourself and your family and whatever else that is. And it's that balance of life that provides longevity, in my mind, and provides you with a healthier and a stronger thinking faculty. So learning, exploring, but also resting appropriately. For me, it's that combination of aspects that we need.
Can I just jump in? Because Eugene, yes, that's very interesting. And I quite like the idea of contract work as well, Kerry, you brought up. But there's a flip side of the gig economy as well. The lack of security might not serve everyone and might leave some people in a precarious situation, especially if the health is not so good or so on. So networking, which you said earlier, for me is one of the strongest asset people might nurture at this stage to be able to cope with the contract work and the ebbs and flows of the opportunities that comes in front of them. What else you found in your research that might help, especially to deal with the downside of what I would call a gig economy?
Right. I actually, I do think that there's without question the downside to it, but I think it's a reality. I think coming out of the pandemic, employers have realized that it's a lot less expensive to hire talented, contract workers to come in and do projects than bring you on with all the benefits. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that that's something, there's a willingness. So for the individual, it requires, if that's a path, yes, there is that job insecurity, but to tell you the truth, there's job insecurity when you're in full-time in-house. Nothing is a given these days. So it's a mindset, of being back to that entrepreneurial mindset again, but it requires quite a bit of discipline, right? If in fact you are going that route, that you're weaving together all these different contract assignments, you need to be very careful about discipline, about setting aside savings and automating as much of that as you can, because you don't have an employer doing some of that for you. And it requires another level of self-management that if you worked for an employer for 20, 30 years, this is going to be pretty daunting to kind of take on this task, but we can all do it. And in fact, I really encourage the idea that it makes you, it does have this factor of wellness that we were just talking about earlier, this sense of autonomy, of being able to have work-life balance, and also the mental engagement of learning new things. Each client, it may present itself with a new set of factors, of challenges, of obstacles that as humans, we really enjoy solving these puzzles. So not that, I think red flags for sure with contract work, but the other ways, what I love about the remote working piece of it, which I do think the genie's out of the bottle, it's here to stay. Yes, they want us to come back for hybrid work. That's going to be a reality too. But for an older worker who has, it does wonders for fighting ageism, because when you're not standing side by side in a workplace with somebody who's a couple decades younger than you, there's that subliminal message of ageism that kind of sneaks into the conversation. But when you're working remotely, you're more likely to be judged by your performance and your productivity. And that's huge when it comes to ageism. It's also makes it easier for an employer to take the risk to hire you because they're really looking at the numbers of how you're helping them. It's always how you're helping the company anyway. But also if you're an older worker and you have health issues, or most people say they're going to work longer than they do, but they stop working because of health issues. And if you have an issue with commuting somewhere, oh my gosh, remote work is fabulous because you eliminate that commute. You eliminate working for an employer where the office isn't retrofitted properly. And because of remote work and the virtual nature of how work has changed dramatically and fundamentally in the last few years, you don't have to work for the company down the street. You don't have to work, you can work for a company in a totally different country. And I think it just opens up the job market in a way that we need to think that way. You don't have to think I need to apply for jobs in my city or near me. Heck no, the kids have figured this out a long time ago as digital nomads, and they were asking for this kind of work long before the pandemic came along. So I think it's again, learning how to have that discipline in order to work this way successfully, understanding how to communicate appropriately, but it's a willingness to try a new way of work that I think will keep us on the job longer.
Thank you.
Kerry, sorry, Tatiana.
Yeah, you touch on all the things that we usually talk about here in this space a lot, and I don't think it's talked about enough, which is managing finance, which is for a lot of people is a dirty word, talking about finance and dealing with money. And I know you wrote about financial security. It's a really important thing, isn't it, Kerry?
Oh, it's huge. And the thing is, even, you've got to pay yourself first. So from each paycheck, you really have to pay attention. If you're the one managing that it's not, you've got to set, and depending on where you live, but here in the US, you have to make sure that you're automating setting aside for taxes and setting aside for retirement savings. And this is something that it's hard to do. And it requires having that discipline and putting those sort of channels up, because if you're not, and healthcare is like here in the US, Fidelity Investments came out with their most recent figure of what it would cost a 65-year-old couple, opposite sex couple, to retire this year. Out-of-pocket healthcare expenses for the rest of their life would be $315,000. I mean, whoa, how many people have that kind? I mean, people don't focus on that. And it is scary. I mean, honestly, that's why you have to stay lean and mean in order to stay in the workplace. And I encourage everyone. I have this thing, it's called Kerry's fitness program that I love to talk about, but it's only 3 pieces, so it won't drive you crazy. But the first one is being financially fit. And when you're financially fit, that's, doing that budget. And really, everyone glazes over at the thought, but just do it. How can you cut down, pay down debt? It's hard to do. It doesn't happen overnight, but whether you're going to start a business of your own or whether you want to change careers, it makes you nimble. If you're not financially dependent on earning a certain salary to pay the rent or to pay, these fundamental basic costs of living, then you have the ability to try new things and to experiment and take risks. But until you get yourself, I mean, debt is the biggest dream killer, and money is a huge obstacle for entrepreneurs. Any entrepreneur I've talked to always says they wish they had more money when they started. But the point is, this is not something that happens overnight. You have to make a disciplined approach to how do I take control of my finances? And that will set you free in many ways. Can I move to a place where the cost of living is less? These are things that take time. The second piece of my program is physical fitness, because that goes a long way to fighting ageism. I get a lot of women, I will say a lot of women, though men too, come up to me when I am speaking and are like, should I get Botox? Should I dye my hair? And I'm like, what the heck, if you want to do that, if it's going to make you feel better, do it. But if you can get physically fit, you have this like positivity, this thing about you that an employer or a client, they want you on their team. They like what you got because you have this sort of can-do attitude that comes from eating with nutrition, physical fit. And I mean, not running fast miles. I'm talking about walking, 20 minutes a day or something you build into your life. It sounds ridiculous, but it's so basic, but really physical fitness. And then spiritual fitness is my third piece, which is talking about having that, and this goes back to our wellness discussion, it's having that place that centers you, whether it's Tai Chi, mindful meditation. I do walking my dog. I like walking my dog in the country where it's quiet and I can just let everything go. And this de-stresses people, because all of these things we're talking about are incredibly stressful for people over 50 trying to manage this idea of longevity. How am I going to afford to live this many more decades? I've got to keep working. And never in history have we been in this juncture where this is happening. And so I tell people, these 3 pieces of my fitness plan are good for anything in life, but it's certainly relevant to your working life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So, Kerry, if I can just respond to one of the things that you said, and what stands out for me is the mindset of being employable rather than being employed. And it's very much a mindset process. So if I, as an aging individual, have a mindset of being employed, then I get caught in the trap of needing a job, needing permanency, and I become reliant on that permanency. Whereas if I've got a mindset of being employable from a contractual and a short-term perspective, it makes me employable for the next opportunity. And I'm not too concerned about the fact that I'm on a short-term contract or process at the moment, because then it changes the way in which I manage my funds and which I manage my future, so that I can ride through the ebbs and flows of that non-permanent employment status, if you like.
Oh, I so love that. That's it in a nutshell. You nailed it. That is just perfect, because it's that mindset that, yeah, I am employable, and it gives you that sort of inner confidence. And again, that attracts people to you. I mean, if you carry that with you, employers or for future clients or whatever, they recognize that. It's a sense of, I value myself in a way, and you're not looking for others for that recognition. You summed that up so beautifully. One other thing I wanted to make a point about learning, because I'm just such a huge fan of learning as a building resilience in yourself, is you don't have to learn anything that's actually related to your work to give you this magic push. There's a fellow who you all probably know, this Simon Sinek. He writes a lot and he and speaks a lot. And I interviewed him for a column I wrote for the New York Times. I've interviewed him a bunch of times, but Simon told me that he loves dance, right? And so his friends kept telling him, you should really take a dance class. And he's like, oh, seriously, I'm not a dancer. I'm not taking a dance class. But he did take a dance class, a ballet class. And he said, it's so funny because now when he's doing his public speaking, what he learned in his ballet class, it's helping him move across the stage better. He's holding his body differently when he gives his presentations. And so it became a benefit to him in his working life, which when he set off to do it, he just took it to get an appreciation of something that he loved.
Fabulous.
I love that. Yes, dancing on stage, absolutely. I have to watch the time because it's 4 minutes for the hour, so it's going so fast. I think we touched a lot of things that is so important, to move, to transition into that next phase of work and what you're going to do in your life. And I see that it's very much aligned with what the Wize Move Society is doing, the lifelong learning, the whole healthy aging part, the networking part. There are so many things that is being offered on the Wize Move Society, and also the fact that you can work worldwide. It is an example, only the people here, Eugene from South Africa, Mary Jane originally Canada, she's in the Netherlands, Tatiana is in the UK. We work with a very, very international network of teachers and trainers and coaches and mentors. So that is, and there's no stopping us. It is. Our VA is in South Africa, but our website builder is in India. So we are all over the place, and that is absolutely something that I love. And one other story I would like to share, because that is what's something that happened today. And I shared with Tatiana before we started, is today I was at the final day of a Silver Stardust program. That's an senior entrepreneurship program here in the Netherlands. And I was a coach for a group of seniors who were considering to start as entrepreneurs. And they did a very, an 8 or 9 week program. And today, so they did, last week, they had to send in their pitch and their business model and things like that. And today was the final day to pitch, and there were 5 finalists, and one of my coaches was there as one of the finalists, and she won. And that is, I just got the message, and the thing is, and that is really what I loved about her, she really had to get out of her comfort zone to do a pitch on video. She can talk about it, what she's going to do, and she has a great idea, to completely different from what she's doing right now. But that thing about making that pitch on her camera, and today, to stand in front of a jury and a room full of people, that was really getting out of her comfort zone. But she did fantastic. And, I'm really proud for her. So Anouk, this is for you. Congratulations. Really did great. And that is something, we all can, there is this next phase in our life that we can take that, to be curious, to be adventurous, to be explorative, to really, to challenge ourselves, to really do something that we love, but also takes us out of that box, if there is a box, but that we can do so many different things. Because yes, we do have to learn, and we do have to learn new skills, and sometimes we need to do dance classes to really improve whatever we're doing. So that's wonderful. Just a very quick round. What did we take out? Eugene, one sentence.
One sentence is never stop learning.
Great one. Great advice. Tatiana.
I love, Kerry, your fitness, the 3 fitness areas. I'm really going to write that down and take that forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. We need to do another hour on those, more the financial part, because this is so important. And especially also because, and that is also the contract part, if we do land in that gig economy, to build on our retirement fund, that is one of the biggest issues, and especially for women. We have a huge pension gap. So it's maybe for another time. Mary Jane.
Challenge your mindset, challenge your limiting beliefs in yourself. Are they serving you? If they're not, then reframe them. So
yes, wonderful. Kerry, the last words are for you.
I've got to say the employable mindset. I love that. I really think that's something I hadn't really put it in those words. And I think that's exactly what it takes to have that inner drive, that inner mojo and inner confidence that we need to take control of our working lives.
I think so too, yes. I hear something, the title of book number 15.
We'll
you know where to find Eugene. He loves that.
Eugene, I'm coming for you, Eugene. No co-author.
I'm definitely in.
Yeah. Well, for now, Kerry, thank you very much for, we will again, write down the title of your book and where people can find it. So buy it on your website or on Amazon or wherever, just send me the title, the link, so that I can share that as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Eugene, Tatiana, and Mary Jane as well. And we'll see you. Hope to see you all next week.
Bye. Thanks a lot, Kerry.
Thank you.
Bye.
Got a dash.